All right, here we are again, Marco. How are you?
Good. How are you, Angela?
Doing well. So thanks for joining us again. You've been a great resource for the community when it comes to traveling to Portugal. So welcome everybody out there in Facebook land. And also if you're joining us on Zoom, my name is Angela Simoes, and this is another webinar hosted by PALCUS. We have Marco Fernandes here from Sagres Vacations. And updates. So
Plenty of them.
give us the latest.
So where should we start? So obviously COVID, and I preface every sort of conversation by saying that what we say today may change tomorrow, but we're going to give you the updates as it is today, right? Because COVID is unfortunately a very dynamic situation everywhere around the world. But I'm going to start with some good news, right? We're talking Portugal. We're talking about travel to Portugal, and we were just talking off air. So as of August 1st, the Portuguese government has actually removed the curfew that they had for restaurants, bars, and other commercial establishments. They were forced to close up until that point, until 10:30 p.m. And they are now closing at their normal time of 2 o'clock in the morning. So welcome
Great.
back to Europe.
Yay.
And that's a great, it's a great sign. And with that, also the mandatory work at home restrictions for some of those areas like Lisbon was also lifted. So now it is an employer's decision to mandate or have their employees work from home. So positive steps. I think with that too, on the same communication, there's also a plan in place to further remove some of the other restrictions by the time Portugal has a 70% vaccination rate, and then 85%, and then obviously from that point on, it's totally, hopefully, back to normal. What that normal will be at that point, obviously, we will find out, but hopefully we'll be as close to 2019 as it can be. But those are all positive steps. I know there's obviously some contradictory news from the States here as far as travel to Portugal and some of the other countries, but I wanted to first give you that first glimpse of what's happening in Portugal. As some of you may know, I know, Angela, we have staff in Portugal. We talk to them every day. I have family I talk to every day. We're constantly talking to them. We're not just gleaning information from the website, from Mr. Google, which can be slightly skewed sometimes. So we are talking to the people on the ground. So, and the information we're getting is that most people are wearing masks. There are still some restrictions in place, which again will be hopefully lifted as the vaccinations increase. So that's sort of the updates as of August 1st. And again, the next goals will be at 75% vaccination and then 85%. So one thing I will say too, obviously we've seen a spike in cases with the Delta variant across the globe, not just in Portugal, not just in Spain, throughout Europe, and also here in the States. We're talking about it. I think I hear this on the news constantly. And it is a real threat. Obviously, it's a real challenge for all of us, but put it in perspective. Portugal, as of August 1st, I have the numbers here, they had a full vaccination of the population of 56.2%. Okay. Vaccination with one dose, 68.7%. Same day, United States of America, fully vaccinated, 50.2%. One
so
dose.
Higher rate.
Yeah. One dose, I think we just reached the 68% or close to 70 now. So so Portugal has 6 points now higher than the United States as far as full vaccination, which is great. I mean, for a small country, they've been doing very well in vaccinations. And again, that's why we're very comfortable and hopeful that they're going to reach the 75% rate in the coming weeks, and then 85% by, I think they're saying October 1st. Just kind of add fuel to the fire too. A couple of the states, so people who may be hearing this and watching this from Florida and Texas, that those cases are going up here in those states too, primarily in those states. But, and Florida has a population of 24 million. Portugal is 10 million. The daily average for Florida as of last week was 17,629 new cases. In Portugal, it was 2,460. So even if you skew for the population, it's a lot higher. Okay. So what is the message? If you're in Florida, go to Portugal. You'll be a lot safer
Safer.
if you can. Yeah, I love Florida. I love going there, but just put things in perspective. And it's not, I'm not saying that people need to be vaccinated, but what I'm saying is that in travel, and people are making decisions, and the governments are making decisions based on who's vaccinated and who's not. And this is not just one country versus another. This is the whole world. The United States right now does not allow Europeans to come to the United States. They still restrict that. They still restrict European travel, but let's look at this other way. They allow people from Mexico to come to the United States. I'm talking to people coming from the air, from tourism, and Mexico has twice as much COVID cases and infections as most countries in Europe. So where is the rhyme and reason in some of these decisions? We do not know.
Okay. So have there been any changes in terms of testing requirements? If you're vaccinated, do you still have to take a test? I know that was the case last time. So it's like, well, it's kind of, if you're vaccinated or not, you still have to show a test. Okay. So if somebody wants to go to Portugal, and even if you're vaccinated, you have to show a test.
So I'll give you a real life case. One of our employees traveled on vacation last week to Madeira, the island of Madeira, but transiting through Lisbon, right? So there, obviously, we know there is no direct flights, unfortunately, to Madeira. Madeira is actually a very well suited for COVID because it's they have, I think, 82% vaccination rate within the island. It's very low numbers. She had a great time, but because she was transiting through Lisbon, she actually had to take a test to be able to enter Lisbon there at the airport, because Madeira, the regional government of Madeira does not require COVID test. Okay, so within Portugal as a whole, there are many restrictions between the Azores archipelago, Madeira archipelago, and then mainland Portugal. Okay. If you were to fly from France to Madeira, Germany to Madeira, the Madeiran government is not requiring you to test in Madeira. But because from the United States, you have to transit through Lisbon a lot of times, and then the Azores as well, you are required to take that test.
So let's say you flew from New York to Frankfurt and then to Madeira.
Yeah, as long as the airline, so if the airline requires you to take a test to travel, then you are at the liability of that airline, right? But let's say you are in Germany, living in Germany, and you take an EasyJet or Ryanair flight to Madeira, and they don't require it, then you are not obligated to take a test. If TAP right now requires a PCR test, Azores Airlines right now requires a PCR test. So you need to follow those guidelines first, and then understand what the restrictions are for each destination.
Okay, we have our first question from Zoom. I'm leaving Friday for Lisbon, and I want to visit the Azores to see cousins. Can I do that without another test?
So the question is, they're going to.
So they're going to go to Lisbon.
Lisbon.
And then from Lisbon, she wants to go to the Azores. So will she have to take another test to get into when she lands in the Azores, or like to get on the plane to the Azores?
So if you're spending more than 72 hours in Lisbon or beyond the validity of your test to get to Lisbon, you will then be required to take another test to the Azores, yes. And in the Azores, in the Azores, you can't take the test at the airport when you arrive. I do not recommend that because it's just a long wait. Okay.
So the best bet is to make sure your flights, if you're going to land in Lisbon, your flight to the Azores is right, like, within your 72-hour travel window. Exactly. Got it. Exactly. But if you stay in Lisbon for 3 weeks or longer, or 3 days or longer, and then decide to go to the Azores, you will have to take a test.
That may change, but in 3 weeks' time, if the conditions improve, that may change. But as of right now, you have to. Yes.
Got it. And best to take the test in Lisbon before you leave. Don't wait till you get to the airport.
I always recommend take your test before you board the flight, because there may be a huge line, especially at a small airport like San Miguel. I'm assuming they're going to San Miguel Airport, Ponta Delgada. There may be a huge line to take those tests. And there's also an online form that most airlines are now requiring you to fill out where you attach your test to it. And that's for, so they can track as far as who's vaccinated or not. And then you can get ahead of the game by doing that before your flight, as opposed to then having to wait a couple hours at the airport.
And for the Azores, there's a follow-up question here that a rapid test is sufficient.
For the Azores, I believe the rapid test is sufficient, depending on the airline you're flying. Again, the Azores, this is why it gets really confusing, because the government may say only one type of test, but if the airline who you're flying stipulates that you must take a PCR test, then you need to take a PCR test. Okay. I'll give you an example. TAP, for example, requires a antigen test on the way back. SATA requires a PCR test on the way back. The United States government only requires an antigen test. But because SATA, Azores Airline, requires a PCR, you have to take the PCR in order to return back to the States, even though the United States government would allow it an antigen.
Okay, that was totally confusing. That was really confusing. Okay.
Yeah, so you have to abide by the airline rules you're booking with first, and then some of the government restrictions may be a little bit different.
Okay, a couple other questions. Do we have to take a test if I'm only going to the Azores for 2 days? And the answer would be yes, because it's not a matter of how long you're staying. It's a matter of getting, when you land, you have to.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you've answered that one.
And then some PCR tests are not accepted everywhere. Are they accepted in Portugal? PCR tests.
PCR tests are accepted in Portugal. I don't know if there is a list of approved tests versus not, but I can tell you that the tests that have been done here for our passengers that traveling to Portugal have all been accepted. So I haven't had any issues with any PCR tests from the United States being accepted into entering Portugal or Spain or any other country.
Okay. Have there been any changes in requirements for kids? So children?
No.
Okay.
No, there's a lot of talk about administering vaccines. I think, both sides of the Atlantic are talking about that. But as of now, there's been no changes in protocol with kids.
And so let's remind our viewers what the requirement for kids is. So to get to Portugal, you don't have to take if you're under 12, I think it was, you said, you don't have to take a test to get to Portugal. But on your way back, all ages have to
take a test.
Yeah.
All ages have to.
And that's a US requirement.
That's a US requirement.
Okay. And any update on, I think you sort of touched on this earlier, but an update on, or have you heard anything about when the US will open to tourist travel? Because we've had a lot of questions about,
of course,
my parents want to come visit us in the US, but kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. No, we have not heard anything. We were hoping that, back in early July, we would have heard something definite on it. But I think there is still some ongoing discussions, and especially now with the Delta variant being, sort of a spike in the US and also in parts of Europe, you may delay that decision. I do know, one of the bigger decisions that was made after our last conversation was that the UK allowed Americans to travel to the UK. Now, that is not being reciprocated yet from the United States, but that was a big decision because for a long time, they were one of sort of the last big country to be closed off to Americans. And so they just, I think as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, have opened up for tourists from the United States. So that's a good segue and a good inclination that things may happen soon as far as Europeans being able to come to the United States. Again, some of those same conditions as far as the testing will still apply. They may, even though they're vaccinated, they may still need a negative COVID test.
Okay. We have a question here. What would happen if I were to travel to Lisbon and then test positive right before my flight back to the USA? My understanding is that I would not be able to fly back and also would not be allowed to check into a hotel. So where would I be able to stay?
So if you are unfortunately checked, if you are found to have a positive result before your flight, then you are not allowed to board. The airline will not allow you to board your flight back to the United States. Now, I will say this, there's been cases of false positives. There's been cases of false negatives. So what I would say is take another test, because there's been many cases where people have gotten a positive result. They take a second test, it's negative. They take a third test, it's negative. So, but obviously if it continues to be positive, then you need to check with, if you were staying at the hotel, I'm sure that they would give you an inclination. Usually there are specific hotels and properties throughout the cities that are designed for people that
Need to quarantine.
have a positive, exactly, to be able to quarantine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Maybe we can do a little bit of research and figure out kind of where those are and add
Yeah.
that to our Portugal travel resources page.
We can do that.
Okay. All right. This is going back to a question that was answered that was asked before. I should clarify my question. I will be in the mainland for 8 days and I'm going to the Azores for 2 days. So I won't be in the Azores for 72 hours. But I think it's still the same.
It's still the same. It's 72 hours before your travel, not 72 hours duration of your stay in the destination.
Right.
So
Right.
just like you were, if you were flying from the United States, you have to take a test within 72 hours of your flight. The same thing would apply from Lisbon to the Azores.
Got it. Here's another question. My mom has to visit our house in Portugal in the Algarve, but she's afraid if Delta variant spikes, she could have a hard time returning. Has there been any problems with Americans trying to return?
Not that I've heard of.
As long as you have the negative test.
As long as you have the negative test. And I also add, we've had travelers, we were just talking offline, we've had guests and customers return from Portugal, spending 2 weeks. We had a couple spend 3 weeks in Portugal. Actually, they just bought a house in the Algarve. That was one of the reasons why they went there. And they had no issues as they took obviously the COVID test, and then they were able to return fine. I will say this, my recommendation is bring a copy of your CDC card, the little white card that has both your vaccination information.
Okay.
Bring not the original, keep the original in a safe place. Bring a copy of it with you, because if you're traveling tomorrow, the conditions that we're talking about apply. But if you're traveling a month from now, there could be different conditions where you may just be able to show your CDC card.
Okay.
So it's just the little extra piece of paper. It's a copy of the original. Bring it with you, because if that happens, then you're ahead of the game. You'll have that with you, and it's a little bit of a better process.
It's a great point. Just wanted to say Daniel is one of the folks that asked a question. He says, thank you. And you're welcome, Daniel.
You're welcome.
Our pleasure. That's why we're doing these. Okay, so we don't have any other questions right now, but I mean, I think this is good information. As far as booking flights and things like that, have you seen any changing in pricing? Because I know that. So I know that I know somebody that was able to get a flight in October of this year, round trip from California for like $500, which is just insanely cheap.
Yeah.
Is it that cheap anymore?
It's not, no.
No,
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you get one of those, let me know, because I will book myself on one of those flights. I think what we're seeing is obviously supply and demand. You know, many people, we were just talking about this in our business. What we're seeing is people either booking last minute, they're calling today to book a trip for 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, or they're booking for the spring or summer of 2022. So what's happening is the laws of supply and demand are dictating that those prices are going to be much higher, because there are less planes flying, there are less hotels that are available. And let's face it, you know, we Americans are obviously talking about travel from the States to Portugal, in this case to Europe, but Europeans have now been traveling within Europe for a number of months. So I've had situations where hotels in Lisbon, hotels in Porto are not available. They're sold out on specific dates in April 2022 because people are already reserving those ahead of time. So not just last minute, but also for a longer lead time, we are seeing the prices go up as well as availability becoming limited.
Got it. Just a quick thing here. Someone's asking, Isabel, can I ask a question about the PALCUS scholarship? Send us an email, Isabel, palcus@palcus.org, or give us a call at 202-466-4664, and we can answer your question there. So just want to stay on topic for this one. So that's good. And what are you seeing in terms of availability of hotels and things like that? Are hotels opening up their capacity, or are they still kind of limiting the number of rooms, that sort of thing?
I would no, as I mentioned, I mean, there are some hotels that have no rooms available on specific dates. So hotels, for the most part, there are exceptions. There are many hotel chains in Lisbon and Porto that have owned 10, 12 hotels throughout the country. So in those cases, they may only have 8 or 10 open because they're not at full capacity yet. However, some of those hotels that are open are in some cases sold out. So we are seeing that business is returning to normal with the obviously restrictions still in place. One of the things that and I don't know if this was the case last time we talked, but right now, if you're checking into a hotel in Portugal, you do have to get tested for COVID before you check in.
We did not talk, even if you've like just landed and you still have your 72?
Well, this is why you need a PCR test. So if you have that test, 72 hours, you can check in. Okay. So let's say that you're doing a multi-day trip where 3 days later, that you're in Lisbon now for 3 days, you're gonna want to go up to Porto. Now you're not. Now you have to take a test to be able to check in.
No.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's new information. I don't think we knew that. Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So that's also part of that same communication that came out from the Portuguese government. So those restrictions have been in place now for a couple of weeks. Will continue to be in place until the vaccination rates obviously go up higher and the government deems it safer to remove them. I will say this, we had customers traveling with those restrictions, and obviously we had tests with us, where our tour guides have tests. They tested on the spot, rapid test, and they're fine. If you need to purchase a test, it's €2. It's not out of this world. So it's not something that if you're planning on doing a 10, 14-day vacation, you're spending thousands of dollars on it. Most people who have been planning this for 6, 8, 9 months, they've been able to adjust. And obviously we also can help with that by having the tests available. And most hotels will have tests there at the check-in. So you can do a rapid test to be able to check in.
Okay, so it's not like you have to go make an appointment at the Red Cross.
No.
And
you don't have to go to the drive-through at the Red Cross and
yeah. Okay, so that's good. So we've actually had people ask, can they bring their own tests with them? Yeah, I have had that question as well. We don't recommend that, and here's the reason why. Because we're not a medical institution to be able to say these tests are going to be valid by the time you get there. So for us, we always say, make sure you get tested there, because if those tests are not valid, then you've just wasted the money. And you still have to get tested there. So we don't recommend that for those reasons. Okay, so just to clarify, if you are having multiple stops on your trip, and if you're checking into a hotel and the time frame is outside of your 72-hour valid test, you will likely have to take a test when you check into the hotel. Yes. So you might want to call ahead though to the hotel to say, or to ask, do you have tests at check-in? Yeah, I will say, I would say most 95% of hotels will have it, and they're also selling it at the local pharmacist right down the corner. If you're obviously booking a tour with a tour guide and things like that, person should have the test available as well. Tests are becoming much more readily available in Portugal than they were 3-4 months ago. So you can find a test. Are these saliva tests, or are these the self-administer? The self-administered. So it's a swab, but you do it yourself. Yeah. So you're not stabbing your brain. You're not taking a brain tissue, no, not the same. All right, good. All right, so we have a couple other questions here. If someone travels to the UK, then going to Portugal at a later date, what are the rules?
Great question. And I don't know the answer to that right now because I think they've updated it. It keeps on
So we
changing.
can find out.
We can find out and get back to that person. Yeah.
Okay. So Mary, we'll get back to you on that question. Another question from another Mary here. My daughter is traveling to Terceira tomorrow, but going through Lisbon. She's traveling with a US passport. Does she have to show proof like a birth certificate? No, because travel is open to US citizens.
Right. If she has a US passport, she's okay to travel.
She's fine.
Obviously, she needs to have a COVID test, a negative
Test,
COVID test
right.
to travel.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because now that travel is open to US citizens,
Yep.
there's no longer the requirement of being a Portuguese citizen.
No, there is no longer. No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Okay.
And as my employee mentioned on her flights going to Portugal, the plane was completely full. On the return, it was completely empty, which obviously follows the thought process of people going to Portugal, even though you're not a Portuguese citizen, because you're allowed to, but obviously Europeans are not able to return back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we talked a little bit about this before we actually started the webinar, but what are things like in Portugal as far as mask requirements and, restaurant capacities, things like that?
Yeah, so we talk to our team on the ground every day. As I mentioned, I have family there, so I get sort of the business side and the personal side of things on a sort of a daily report. Masks are very common. I would say that with the exception of the younger audience, those 20, 30-year-olds that, want to feel a little bit more free, unfortunately, those are the exception, but the mask wearing is very common all throughout Portugal. So as you exit the airport, you will see masks. They are mandated right now through the beginning of September. I believe that will be extended, through probably another 30 days. Restaurants are open, hotels are open, museums are open. Again, we are doing full-fledged tours, complete 14-day comprehensive tours. Obviously, we're adapting to the new reality, to the point of we actually, when somebody books with us, we actually have a nurse going to the hotel to do a test for them before they go to the airport. So that way they don't have to deal with the airport situation or try to find a test on the way back. So we just adapt, all of our vehicles are safe, so tourism for us is, I'm not going to say normal because nothing is normal, but it's as close to what it was in 2019 as we can be given the restrictions. Mm-hmm. Again, everything is open. There are some cases where capacity is limited at some of the bigger museums, some of the bigger restaurants, the bigger venues. Weddings are still limited for capacity. Major events, they are requiring you to be vaccinated or to show. So in Portugal and in Europe, I should say, including Portugal, they have the European digital passport, which is this green passport to show you're vaccinated. So when we just talked about if you're an American or if you're a non-Portuguese resident and you want to check into a hotel and you don't have that 72-hour window now for your original test, you have to be tested. Local Portuguese person that is going from Lisbon to the Algarve to stay 5 nights at a hotel, they can show this digital passport and not have to take a test. Obviously, this is just for locals, right? For residents, it does not apply for travelers. The expectation, and again, I'm estimating here, is that the CDC card down the road will be allowed for Americans to check into hotels without the need for testing, but that will only happen.
So we're anticipating that will happen, but we don't have confirmation of that yet.
No, that is a government decision.
And the certificate you're talking about is that mobile app that they
Yes.
were encouraging people to download, and now you have this European certificate. So
Exactly.
does that work in other parts of Europe
Yes.
as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're flying to the person who asked from the UK, if you're from the UK, you have to be a resident of the European Union. So that's the caveat today. If you're from the UK and you're going to Portugal and you have that digital passport, then you can fly in. You're fine because you're showing a full vaccination protocol for you. For example,
Rome, anywhere else
anywhere in
European
Europe.
Union.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But it
So we
has to
had,
be an EU
it
country.
has to be an EU. We had clients, one of the first clients that landed in Portugal 2 days after Americans were allowed to enter the country. They were from New York State, and they had their New York State has their own application to show vaccination. So it's a state, New York State only application. So for residents of that state, and they tried showing that to the hotel, including the CDC card, and they did not take it because they were not residents. So just to put it in perspective.
And so Ernest, I hope that answers your question about the European vaccine certificate being applicable within all EU countries. But one thing that we have also been asked quite a bit is, so let's say you're a Portuguese citizen, but you live here in the US, but you want to travel there. Can you download that certificate even though you live here, but you're a citizen?
It's not, it's not doable. Let me just say this. If you are going to Portugal and you want to get to be able to download the certificate, you will have to go to the Loja Cidadão. You will have to show that you're a resident of Portugal, which
So you have to have an address.
You have to have an address of someone there. So it's not a very easy situation for somebody who's living in the United States to prove that. So it is really meant, let's face it, if we had people coming to the United States with a EU digital passport, we wouldn't necessarily be accepting that because it's not a CDC governed sanctioned card either. So it kind of works either way.
Got it. And do you happen to, so basically, let's say somebody has a house there and they go visit the house for the summer. Technically, they could try to go to their local Loja de Cidadão and say, listen, I want to use my house address here to connect it. They could try, but no guarantee.
Bring some Skittles, a bottle of port wine, and Portuguese way.
And do you happen to know how long that is valid for? Like, is this, the digital certificate valid for a year? I mean, we don't even know how long the vaccines are valid for, right? If we have to.
It's a moot point. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think anybody knows that. We're sort of just given the information once the government releases it. Nobody's come out and said there is an expiration date on it.
Got it.
At some point, they may be.
Okay. Another question here from Mary. Is there a curfew all over Portugal at bars and restaurants? And no,
Not
right? They lifted
longer,
it?
No. So yeah, so 2 o'clock in the morning is your curfew right now. So you're staying up past 2 o'clock in the morning, then there's a different
Past your
issue.
bedtime, people.
Yeah.
Another question from Cecilia. Is Lisbon still under the weekend lockdown that they had in July?
No, so this is what transpired is when the August 1st communication from the Portuguese government was released with the removing of the curfew, that allowed Lisbon to be lifted, so to speak. And it didn't really make a lot of sense what they were doing because people were still traveling to and from work. So there were still people coming in and out of the city. So that is not the case any longer. The whole entire country now just has the 2 o'clock. I mean, everything is open until 2 in the morning. There are some capacity limitations at some of the restaurants, like I said, some of the bigger restaurants, but other than that, they're fine. Okay,
great. And another question here from Isabel. I don't know if we'll have the answer to this, but we are flying Swiss Air and have a layover there, then into Portugal. What test do we need for Switzerland? So you'd have to call Swiss Air, right? And then, okay.
Yeah. So this is what I tell everyone is if you're booking your own flight, the first thing you're going to see on the airline webpage, if you're booking online, is a COVID section. And in that COVID section, it will tell you what test it is required for your flight from point A to point B. That is your first point of and the first reference that you should be looking at as far as your restriction, because no matter if the government says we only require A test, but if the airline requires B test, you need to go with what the airline requires because you can't get there.
Got it. Great. What else? We don't have any other questions right now. What else do you think would be important to share?
Just to be prepared, like I said, have your documentation in a row if you're traveling. Make sure you bring a copy of your CDC card. Allow, just like we were talking offline before the Facebook Live as well, things are taking a little bit longer. Checking into a hotel are taking a little bit longer. And we were talking about your Uber experience here, but people are coming back online, right? Employers are figuring out how to work around with low staffing levels, more people traveling now. at the same time when there was nobody traveling. So
Mhm.
allow for time, especially at Lisbon Airport. You have situations where you have 6 international flights arriving at the same time. It's sometimes it's a madhouse because there's only 3 or 4 kiosks open. So
Mhm.
your expectation should be that it's going to take some time. Even if you're transiting through to get to another destination, at the restaurants, just allow for a little bit more time than what you were used to, just because people are still trying to figure out how to work around the system.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that's it for this one. I'm sure we'll have another one in a couple of weeks because things are going to change.
Things are going to change. Yes. Yeah.
And,
No. That's the one constant is change with the COVID.
Right. Well, we appreciate you staying on top of everything and keeping us informed. You've been a great resource for the community, so thank you very much. And for those that have questions, in the Facebook comments, we did put a link to Sagres Vacations. So if you want to reach Marco, just visit their website and send him a message, or through Facebook. They're also on Facebook. And then we will post a recording of this webinar on our website as well, under portugal.org/Portugal travel. And there's other resources there, links to the Portuguese government travel page and those kinds of things. And then of course it'll be archived on our Facebook page. So, but until then, safe travels, everyone. Be smart and safe, and anticipate long wait times and long lines. But other than that, enjoy wherever you're going. Thank you, Marco.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela. And on our part, we'll keep updating you and PALCUS on any dramatic new changes or any new changes at all, just so we can stay on top of it. And just as you mentioned, I think travel is still a reality. People are traveling. You just have to be prepared. You have to be informed. And a lot of times you have to make your own decision. Don't just be, let yourself sort of be immersed in the world of what's on TV, online. Talk to the people on the ground, talk to people who you trust, because sometimes the story may be a little bit different than what you're seeing on TV.
Great point.
Okay,
and with that,
great.
We'll say good afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Ciao.
Thank
you. Bye.
Bye.